I'm Dr. Will Donnelly. I'm in the Department of English, Rhetoric, and Writing here at Berry, and we're here tonight because of one of my colleagues to celebrate the release of Sandra Meek's fifth and most recent book of poetry, An Ecology of Elsewhere, published just a few short days ago by Persia Books, and then we'll have a question and answer session with Dr. Meek at when she's done reading. I got a sneak peek at this book last week at the AWP conference where Sandy signed my copy, and she'll be sticking around for a short while after her reading and Q&A to sign a copy for you too, if you like. What struck me first on looking through this latest collection was what always strikes me when I read her work, is that at its heart, language is really a form of music. Sandy clearly knows this too, which is what I think leads her to write lines like this one from Aloe dichotoma, River Tree. Why then, to weather that sun, did you marry its mirror? Why gift your body's cool to that regret? To what wished to remain fire? Or this from Skeleton Coast. Even the smallest skulls, seated with black mussel shells, streamlined towards sea, away from horizon's Marsscape of fawn red sand, scattered rock. It's impressive writing on the page, but it's even stronger, I think, when it's read aloud, which I think is a testament to its beauty. Sandy's also a writer who's well acquainted with place. The seared deserts of southern Africa punctuate this collection and are also on the cover. It's a place where Sandy has spent a good deal of time, and her love and respect for that part of the world and its inhabitants are apparent here on every page. I'm going to leave the rest of the reading to her. It's her reading. But first, in case you've never met her before, Sandra Meek is the author of 5 books of poems, An Ecology of Elsewhere, Road Scatter, Biogeography, which won the Dorset Prize, Burn, and Nomadic Foundations. She's also edited an anthology called Deep Travel, Contemporary American Poets Abroad, which was awarded a 2008 Independent Book Publisher Award Gold Medal. Her poems have appeared in the Best of the Net 2015, the Kenyon Review, Poetry, the American Poetry Review, Conjunctions, Agni, Prairie Schooner, and the Iowa Review, among others. A recipient of a 2011 National Endowments for the Arts Fellowship in Poetry and the 2015 Lucille Medwick Memorial Award from the Poetry Society of America. She has twice been awarded Georgia Author of the Year in 2006 for Burn and in 2003 for Nomadic Foundations, which also was awarded the Peace Corps Writers Award in Poetry. Dr. Meek served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Manyana, Botswana from 1989 to 1991. She's the co-founding editor of 9 Bar Press, director of the Georgia Poetry Circuit, poetry editor of the Phi Kappa Phi Forum, and of course, Dana Professor of English Rhetoric and Writing at Berry College. And she also has a website, www.sandrameek.com. But getting your own website seems like the least of her achievements. So please help me welcome Sandra Meek.
Thank you, Will. That nice introduction. Thank you all for coming. And thanks to Berry College for gifts of time and funds that helped make some of the travels in this collection possible. And thanks also to my publisher, Persia Books, who made copies of the book available to us today, actually almost a month before its official publication date of May 2nd. So I'm glad that they let us have those here so we could start off from home. So as Will said, a lot of the poems in this book do come from traveling in Southern Africa. I made 4 extended trips back to Southern Africa from about 2008 to 2011, going back to some of the places where I lived in Botswana and where I traveled in Southern Africa. And this first poem, the opening poem of the book, is about a thorn bush that was everywhere in the village where I lived in Botswana. Botswana it's basically the Kalahari Desert and then this kind of scrub bush around it, and then all the water's in the north. I was in the far south. So this thorn bush was everywhere in the village. And it's very distinctive for having, it's like toothpick type thorns. Acacia Karoo Hain, white thorn. Ivory monastery, you invite retreat, your quills without ink, your needles hollow, your slow exhalations of whistled breath, both cut and seam, the noteless stems of music a girl scores into her arms. You are the soul's razored canister. Antenna of many voices, you tune to the milky ships of distant planets, your fray of ghosts without waste, without wrists, a crystalline heart slivered to fossil trails of shooting stars. You are the desert's drained hourglass, its whittled vanishing. You are the bristling, unlit incense of fog and sea froth. Your liver-spotted sleeves, the stiff, papery threads of a petrified fountain. Village cook fires' lingering veil, honed to narrow vials, to spines of moonlight, echoing the body's deepest wands, the cuneiform of longing, how you avoided pain by becoming its measure, your starved scepters clinging to anyone passing. Woven also into the book are travels that my sister and I took with my father the last few years of his life. We had sort of a difficult history growing up, and those travels the last few years were a really healing and wonderful experience for us. And so that's woven in here, and this poem comes from one of those trips, but it also has some other elements in it. So I want to just mention a couple of things. It mentions the Rainbow Balm parties that were held in Honolulu on July 9th, 1962. And that's a real thing. And that was the night that the U.S. military launched a hydrogen bomb, which was 100 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. So they launched this bomb into the Van Allen belts. And the Van Allen belts are radiation belts that surround the Earth, and they had recently been discovered. In fact, the day that Van Allen announced the discovery at a press conference, people from the military apparently were in the audience and came up and said, "Hey, we'd like to blow that up." And he said, "Okay." And he signed on to that. And I think later he kind of regretted that. But anyway, this is what happened that night in part. So the Rainbow Bomb parties were the parties that were held in Honolulu. This was not a secret. Everybody knew it was going to happen. And so they had these rooftop parties so people could drink and watch what happened when you shot a hydrogen bomb into the Van belts. So this is sort of a Cold War, appropriate for a family. The imaginary heart. To bring pineapple, to fashion canned peach slices into pairs of parentheses, hemming a cottage cheese mound, married to a reef of lettuce, iceberg, rigid enough to endure without wilting the evening's wait for my father, who again wouldn't be calling and wouldn't be home until evening had better passed with friends and the ubiquitous bourbon at the Black Knight bar. This was what my mother first taught me of salad. Just before she died, she again believed I was her small child, so asked, would I survive in this world if she left? And the hospice nurse holding her other hand assured her, yes, her work was done. Why, before ever even leaving Earth, did the first astronauts script what they'd say from space? Before they could count on arriving at orbit visible only as light, like the luminous lives enchanting my father 60 years ago on night watch at ship's aft, all those single-celled animals turned to a brilliant phosphorescence, though nothing really was burning. 18, the freedom at last to sign 4 years to the sea he'd never once seen. Ashore Oahu, the Earth's glittering attic graves lay beneath him, seedless and expecting no labor. A childhood dragging that larger-than-his-life cotton sack through the fire of Oklahoma sun, as distant now as any apocryphal story of monks twinned their entire adult lives by shrouds their own faith stitched to their side. What frees the father binds the child. For my father's father, arrival meant that small acreage, his own, after decades sharecropping dust. For my father, liaisons that began while my mother slept in a hospital bed, me safely down the White Hall in a plastic bassinet. That chain of islands, how like studs on a wheel, one sinks beneath the sea as another breaches its crest of dark stone. What we know least is what lies directly beneath our feet. Scientists' best hunch, a churning boil centers what they've circled and circled from space, photographing to cliche its blue marble, its clouded eye. At 15, with my parents in Vegas, I palmed matchbooks from every casino we visited. At the Riviera, my father slipped an emptied ashtray into his own pocket for me, as everyone hooted and clapped for Bobby Vinton cutting off Sealed with a Kiss to French some woman in the audience. Not to find a single dark-haired young girl on the beach sailors could pay to take their picture with, waxy cups of plumeria, pierced and strung to lays, evidencing whatever story they might be weaving for home. That surprised him most, returning late in his 70s to show his aging daughters his own lost youth. As if those islands, long stitched to a single star in the flag he served, might have lived on as perpetual fantasy, festive as the rainbow bomb parties held the year I was born. All-night viewers on Honolulu rooftops celebrating with specially concocted cocktails, Atomic Fizz, Rocket Romp, Van Allen belts of bourbon named for defense's latest craze, what Operation Starfish Prime's atomic explosion was to bend that night, charging the sky to how many brilliant, never-before-seen colors because discovery meant something else to blow up, and that Pacific sky tonight could tomorrow be Moscow's streets or our own bomb-shelterless neighborhood where my mother would long hold us to a tableau of mothers and daughters dutifully waiting before a chilling slab of meat and little plates of salad, as if that could make up a happy family, whether or not my father returned home before midnight. Because my parents never should have married, They did so twice. A woman's work is never done. Misery made up how much of that closed-in house's cloud? 9 months thickening through the long Colorado winter before the windows could finally be flung open. But every one of us smoked then. And if it's true that what's held too tightly tumors the body, what pearled her lungs like tiny river stones, holding her beneath the water rising through her own scarred chest, was it anger she couldn't outlive to share this fresh pineapple my father, now advancing in his own cancer, has had fresh flown in for my sister and me, as much memento of the trip we three took together as fruit of the one time he'd signed on to something he'd never once regretted. That perfect reconciliation of sweetness and light glowing before us. His open arms gesture toward the table said what she never could. There is no return to a world without fire. Girls, go ahead, eat. The next one goes back to Southern Africa, to Namibia. Southern Africa is probably my favorite place in the world, but like any other place in the world, there are real environmental challenges. And Namibia is the only country in the Southern Hemisphere to continue a seal hunt. And this occurs at the world's largest colony of Cape Fur seals. And I revisited the colony in 2009, just before the opening of that year's hunting season. So in a single season, about 85,000 baby seals are clubbed to death there for their pelts, and about 6,000 adult males for their genitalia. And all that's exported. During seal season, the reserve is closed to visitors until 10 a.m. This allows time for the dawn hunt and then for them to clean up the beach before tourists have a view to the beach. If you look at official Namibian tourist websites about the reserve, they make no mention of the hunt, instead citing jackals and brown hyenas as being amongst the principal predators. Skeleton Coast, Cape Fur Seal Reserve, Cape Cross, Namibia. Even the smallest skulls, seated with black mussel shells, streamlined toward sea, away from horizon's Marsscape of fawn red sand, scattered rock. Spines curved the length of my arm, elbow to wrist, littered the gray beach, the baby seal graveyard, poking like broken umbrella ribs through skins emptied. Along the jackal's star print trails, I add my own moony lumber to, shadowing their hunt along the colony's edge. The Point Break wave focuses to hundreds of seals riding that rippling indifference to the orientation of shore. Rookery, where thousands more lounge, nurse, call out. Mothers in husky barks, the young with the staccato tremolo of lambs. So many still infant sleep, 3 days preseason. Black coats not yet turned, the dullness that would save them. Copper underfur, the yearling's olive gray. Fade of the weathering, split rail cross, its one standing arm. A lost century's shipped-in fence post, lichen has tatted its bony lace to, at the handful of human graves where morning's trek began. All that remains of the guano rush, white gold, the industry's failed town. There is no parallel between peopling and sealing. Language always indentured to dominion, this coast named not for the jackals' leavings, spines the clubbers won't lead to shore, before the rusting wrecks centuried along its rocks. Ships once armed with astrolabes and marine quadrants to catch the altitude from sun at noon, pole star at midnight, centuries before the discovery of longitude, before the science of cartilage plates and goblet cells, before the weighing of organs, before the invention of the circular diamond saw, before the breath of dust ashing its tip, dulling the reflection in the laboratory's steel table as it longitudinally severs the upper canines to calculate the age of the dead. Incremental lines counted like the rings of tree trunks, as absolute here in their absence as the distance between this ivory brain pan I photograph and a perfect sphere between globe and planet, expression and intent. Seal reserve, as in we reserve the right to. Science no answer for the water-worn stones that spill from the split stomachs of so many dissected young. For my hunching all morning, all afternoon, to blur to this rock the caravel of my own body, sad sail of pale skin, to disappear in their view as the kelp beds they wrapped foam emerald. The distant sea and sky entirely sapphire. As jackals with salt-sprayed fur, blood-stained muzzles loop through the landing as if weaving a maze of sea-slick boulders, their terrestrial limbs effortlessly navigate. What we share, the hunger to stay angelic meet. Bones wholly light shadowed by a halo of skin beginning its wear from our very beginning, like the wooden padros, the first Portuguese arrivals erected to mark hours before sailing on. No dew given the domain of salt and wind, the quickening dissolve discovered only on return. The ship's second wave loaded padros of limestone to outweigh weather. Generation after generation, infant seals keep swallowing pebbles and sea glass. Clubbers worry their day's crop of coins into grain. A microscope hones the cusped teeth laid out beneath as if to constellate with the known, some small field of night sky. You and I rattle these bones, the sorry dice of these words between us, all ballast, all in the end weightless as the froth that will foam the mouths of the youngest 3 days from now, the ones calling out at the highest pitch, voicing the sympathetic vibration, the 3 tiniest bones of the body, as if they might find there anchor, safe harbor, some small welcoming, waving them ashore. Hope you're feeling all cheered up now. I'll read a different kind of poem here. This one is set in Puerto Rico. And the title is Permanent Threshold Shift, which refers to something happens when you blow your eardrum out. So an alternate title to this poem might be How I Blew My Eardrum Out at a Puerto Rican Festival, where guys drive around jeeps stacked with police sirens and dressed in capes with cartoon characters on them. And I'm reading this especially for my students who are familiar with me going, yeah. To let them know it's not It's not old age. It's Puerto Rico. Although it's also old age. Permanent threshold shift. Festival de las Máscaras, Atillo, Puerto Rico. The acoustic shadow of the skull, all that would save from disappearing, the one hemisphere of world, not muscled with banks of sirens stacked on jeeps, parading with Pasofino horses, garlanded the region's tricolor, white, green, red, when the first loaded jeep of Los Gatos, in passing, screamed into my right ear, its 33 sirens stacked unearthly music on the dash, the drums rupture, tearing the cusp between body and the Lope's perfect 3-beat gate, not hammer, anvil, stirrup, but hooves, still ticking the broken pavement of the visible, what silence distances, even as they near, the riders' crepe capes nearly brushing my shoulder as they slide by with the fluency of acoustic levitation. How sound can be orchestrated to suspend steel bricks and porcelain plates. How its loss seems to float these masked men, aping Roman soldiers, this third day after Christmas, searching for Jesus by rushing the crowd, some with bloody baby dolls impaled on plastic swords, some tossing candy, some spraying with shaving cream, the already frothing crowd, now a pantomime of the world I remember sounding from every direction, when one might still be saved simply by cupping hands to ears in two parenthetical certitudes of absence, chambers of the ocean's serene song, blocking the blast of la, diaesis, re, diaesis, la, diaesis, alternating pitch of the sirens witching the air. So, solely because the spine is a mast spiked by salvation's stony skull, listening rests still in the extravagant fetal curl of my left ear, the organ of Corti hurled there like a tiny swamping island, or the jewel tip of a drill ready to hum any given spectral harmonics. What's riding off on those perfect hooves of triumvirate grace, not the world entire, not yet, not yet, not yet. That image of cupping the hands in two parentheses, I would photograph my sister who's here from that trip together, photo of her cupping her ears there, which was a very smart thing to do. So, no rupture. All right, so I'm going to jump back to Namibia now. And this is another desert poem. This is set in the Namib Desert. And a couple things to mention here. So this is it's entitled Welwitschia mirabilis, and this is a very unusual plant that grows only in the Namib Desert, only a certain distance from the coast. It lives entirely off of fog, and so it grows only in Namibia and in Angola. And part of the reason it's preserved in Angola is because there are still landmines there, and they're being removed. But for 27 years, these landmines were put in during the Civil War following independence. So you'll see some images of that, and also an allusion to the Miss Landmine competition, which was a real thing in Angola in 2008. Sadly, it lasted only 1 year. But the intentions, if you look it up, the intentions of the organizers seemed very good. They wanted to empower women who had lost their legs because of stumbling on landmines in the fields. But people didn't really see it as that empowering to have a beauty contest for women who lost their legs to landmines, and so it only lasted the 1 year. I think Welwitschia mirabilis, Namu Desert. The heart is a caldera of ash encircled by 2 wind-whipped leaves. What begins bannered broad as Miss Landmine's sash ends in a pageant of feather fray, spiraling the stem's terminal groove. Tar gray lips, spongy as hot asphalt, crowning what bore and bears it, a windfield's drift of sand. With distance, they're great hulking spiders, hunching a limbless horizon. Wind-raked debris, stacks of tattered carcasses, not what felled Welwitsch awestruck to his knees. Mirabilis, miracle, this circle of siblings born 500 years ago of a single freakish week of rain. Not bushes, but trees, driven underground. 5, 10, 20 centuries they thrive off collision. Morning's fog belt, an alchemy, divined of desiccation, and a current's icy rise to a sabered coast rattling its outsized pearls. Sea-smooth stones and the knobby wreck of oysters pried open, clean as kneecaps. Survival means living always in reverse. Night opening stomata, trunk a taproot plunging toward core. That interred star centering a planet warmed not by light, but decay. U-238, 4,500 million years, a half-life ghosting the age of Earth, where surfacing terminates as discovery, as drilling fuses. No entries, freshly dug perimeter of signs, jutting the park's own rusting signage, warning tourists against trespass, curiosity which killed a lichen field, laboring centuries toward this very absence, the poise of ore trucks, straight-lining horizon, paused until the unearthing word, okay. What survives is made visible, most for what scars it. Field history endures as ox wagon tracks neatly scoring it still. A lichen's fragility, its strength, that it exists only as fusion, scaffold of fungus and algae feeds. But nothing's singular. Lop off either leaf, a Welwitschia will never sprout a third, will remain always the flawed schism it never lost faith with. Welwitschia, in Nama, Carlos, in Herrero, Onyanga, desert onion, because it isn't landscape that starves. Lebensraum, just a little elbow room. Konzentrationslager, a little space to disappear in. Nama, Herrera, a little space for forgetting. Century we were born to, born here in genocide, all exits blocked, but to thorn, water holes, poison, survivors strung into plots of barbed wire, narrative enthralling the young Hitler a half world away. Whether influence or confluence, inspire or conspire, like leads to like, desert by desert, Namu, Kalahari, nothing singular, nothing true, twin, race hygiene, bastard studies, operations overt and covert, war civil and cold, history, a spectral arc, so deeply dug, the desert's pronged with sand-shrouded tiaras, the antlered plates of bounding mines, with glass mines forged to the span of the human palm, of baby carriage wheels, round puck smooth, scattered like shattered spines, discs of some fossil species more or less human. But nothing's fossil but the living here. Darwin's term, living fossil for the Welwitschia, for what stalls at origin. What changes? Only circles, seasons clocked by arrival, fetal fists of cones unfurling, pollination by flies. Like butterfly feelers, the narrow shoots, the cone's top, like delicate antenna tuning the static hum of the world's latest mind harbor. The human body needs no acoustic signature, is both trigger and crutch. Despite his urging a local name, the Academy ambered Welwitsch in Latin, Welwitschia since conserved by military occupation, by colonial proclamation, by the serendipitous sowing of minds, unharvested still. Phantom by phantom, the desert unscrolls, dualed leaves, rind thick and corrugated, as the zinc roof held down by stones of a house a woman one morning walks away from, into a field suddenly percussive with light. To survive, the body will seal at the thigh, heal to a single bruise of air, a tenderness that lies only in the missing. I wish I could tell you it was going to get happier. The last one will be happy. 3 more points. So this next one goes back to the U.S., to the southwest, to Zion National Park in Utah. And this poem is for my father. Zion. Sandstone weathered to temples, what drew his eye beyond summer's daily settlings, checkerboard mesa, an etched heel of chalk, altitude, a confusion of storm clouds and stone. From a bench riveted to view, he chased each evading breath, like a butterfly flickering from the failing net, his lungs became, in the thin air of beauty and age and disease advancing blind to the night of the day his bowels would suddenly let him go. Refusing the hospice nurse his bath, he let me wash not his streaked legs, but his feet in an aluminum bowl, like the one his mother once had snapped peas to. What I had never once touched, I held in the warmth, rinsing away his body's leavings, as if he'd just again been crossing barefoot his father's slashed fields, his mother's garden, in that rare Oklahoma rain, returning to her, not his grown child's hands, washing each foot still so slight, so childlike, despite the nails thickened to horn, yellowed to a quartz he'd never again climb to. Shaded by a grotto's outcropped arch, its single cupped palm tipped to hammer or shield, I photographed what he couldn't see from that bench. Weeping rock, groundwater become the briefest sky. The morning I found him, the tiny fork of oxygen still clasped his nose. The catheter still unraveled his body. His right arm stiffened where it curled as if to cushion his fall. What was over before his body touched the hall carpet so gently, only his glasses spilled away. To be this world's child is to be a hairline crack, a slot canyon orphaned, both of matter and light, not the immensity of what's held apart. What had seemed to hover was retreat, a shape-shifting sky. My father's many mansions, what he traced in faith I had no faith in, scars of the cross-hatching wind, haunting the mesa's fossil clutch of blown sand. It seemed I could simply replace his glasses on his nose and restore him to vision, as if he would see my face then, not the grainy silver blurs, the ghosted mountainside I'd offered him, but the barest rose curtain torn by clean white gashes, what had so long steeped in stone, falling unmistakably as rain, as I sat by his side, and when they came for his already cooled body, I would not be moved. I held his hand. I did not let go. This next poem goes back to Botswana. There are multiple voices woven into this poem. They come from my talking with a family of narrow San. The San are the people that we refer to as the Bushmen, which is considered a derogatory term in Botswana. So the San are the indigenous people of Botswana, and they have endured a lot of persecution at the hands of the majority population, including forced removals from their ancestral lands. And despite recent Supreme Court case decisions in their favor in Botswana, they're still struggling for full rights. And another related issue this poem touches on, you remember Cecil the lion story, the lion in Zimbabwe, the hunter shot? So that raised this big outrage against trophy hunting, and Botswana came out very quickly and said, not a problem here because we have this trophy hunting ban they enacted in 2014. But the hunting ban excludes registered game ranches. And so what it did was allowed people to pay to hunt and outlawed again the San from carrying out their traditional way of life, which was living off of the desert. Our therapists offer ant bear, calamari. To spiral into the ear of a story, a holding out. Komsa, elusive, what stays always underground, sheltering in abandoned mounds. But the den the ant bear digs, even a leopard can secret there. Read nomadic as vagrant, San as bushman, removal for their own good. Dawn as a day's license to kill. A mid-desert trespass, a night's hunting lodge, communal breakfast, the Botswana guide patting my shoulder, laughing away my recoil at sport hunting. When we see the eland, when we have him in our crosshairs, I will tell him someone loves him. If the shadow reports the body, if meat is remembered distance, wind spiced with camel thorn, the juice of roots, the throat's deep catch. If what feeds the muscle raises the arm that smashes a wellhead in a desert village, that digs a shallow grave to bury alive? What would starve it? Holmes's family yard, a wash tub cradled in dust, tin ribs echoed by the bow of bone, last arc shadowing the belly of his boy asleep in the tub, by blade after blade of the dog watching over. Look, to make fire, one doesn't need matches, a shop, but false sandpaper, the sticks of two distinct trees, one brittle, one soft meat, two ready hands. Silencing without answering his cell's digital recall of a mechanical ring, Comsa translates her narrow when I ask his elderly mother her age. I can't read the dates, she says. I didn't go to school to remember. Whatever evil unfurls the skin isn't spirit, but the eyes of others seeing others. The terror of a Malloy, less the snakes witched writhing into the victim's gut, than the knowledge that one had wished them there. She says they stop us from going into the bush. We are surrounded. She wakes each morning to put on the shame of cloth, skirt, scarf, a decades-old loss each day still brushing her skin. Money, what made her poor, how, she says, they made her need it. Even as they fell, entranced, for that other embedded difference, xenoless, garnets unearthed as harbingers of mine. Astrology of the ant bear, one of the Dataula, Swana divining bones I paid to have thrown once read as childless, my future a truth the Naka couldn't get past searching how best correct. No skin for skin, no body for body, no reading stars by the entrails of fire scattered and ashed, no path by the light of a diamond signature, by the new lodge's borehole, floodlit spillage for viewing those beautifully cursive horns inscribing the dusk. Eland who catch in the vacancy of air the taint the human misses, the whisper of sand filling the hourglass of a man's ear. Comsa. The ant bear, this is how she eats. She puts out her sweet tongue. The ants will gather there. She will lay quietly. When she pulls back her tongue, the nest will be gone. This is the last poem of the book, and the last poem that I will read. So this is sort of like a bookend for the first poem, the thorn bush. This is a poem about the baobab tree, which you're probably familiar with. It's that real humongous trunk, and when the leaves fall off of it, it looks like it's upside down. It has this huge base to it. It's a tree that can live up to 3,000 years old, and an old baobab tree forms a complex ecology. So a lot of the creatures related to the baobab are in the poem, including some elephants, and also a museum's dusky elephant heart makes a brief appearance. And so this is set in Letaba, Kruger National Park, South Africa, Adansonia digitata baobab. Weightless as the heart that shelving dried to a fraction, Your fruit's chalky remains are fanned with copper threads, frayed veins desiccated as those pondered through decades of elephant hollow glass to a glazed tissue of dust. Digitata for the hand, digitigrade for the single foot, even the largest must lift on tiptoe. Such delicate scale, such slight progress, seeds witched away from fat green teardrops fallen to your kettled roots, here knobby as new potatoes, there ropey as lava folds, twisted gray laundry. Windfall of air upon air, fruit colored to clotted cream, each rind shattered cheek a velvet olive or army, depending the hour, the angle of shadow. Spring, you were all ruffled full moons, which night-blooming fruit bats settled, tugging close the umbrella-ribbed rags of their wings, like jacketed old men. By morning, your spent flowers, corpse rank as summer, witness to the hook of each snapped stem, the spindle of your every bat-born branch, hollow as a house, the heart unblooded as the riveted rivulets of sand ants trail your trunk to, spit-blued petroglyphs of passage, negotiating the stars of lichen, half the pale splatter of weaverbird droppings, half a world ladder of fingerprints. Squat thumb horizon makes of you, even beneath what sad shade inversion gives, upside down tree, thrown out of paradise tree, your storied roots, such thin shelter. Thank you very much.
We've got time for a few questions if anybody has any. Yes, Lee.
I have two questions. One's extremely broad, one's very specific. All of your poems in the book, is there any one thing that ties them all together? There's a microphone.
Cool.
Hello? Can I repeat it? Did you hear it?
Could you hear what he asked?
Yeah.
So is there anything that ties all of them together? Well, I think probably the concern for place and the relationship between the human and the non-human, including the physical as well as the living. I think the interconnection of all things is something that all the poems are concerned with. And travel does come up a lot. Most of the poems are somewhere else. Against the ecology of elsewhere.
Thank you. My second question, yeah, I'm probably getting the title wrong. There was one 3 poems back. It was about the Namib Desert. You said that life means living always in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And that just really stuck to me. I couldn't think about anything else that you said.
Okay.
I couldn't get it out of my head. So I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
That's a great observation. On one level, it comes literally from, so the Welwitschia, to survive this incredibly harsh desert atmosphere where it basically doesn't rain, they go deep, deep, deep. And so if you were to look at it, it's 2 tattered, thick leaves that kind of form this debris pile. So maybe it's as high as maybe your knee, or your waist at the most. But it goes many, many, many feet into the ground. And so on one level, it's that at the literal sort of living in reverse instead of going up, going down. But also with that, I'm thinking about memory, how important memory is, and how we do live by having that stuff in our past to be able to recall. And so in a way, we do live in reverse.
I can't wait to read the rest of the book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I always love to hear you read. It's beautiful. This poem, Narratina, Virginia, on page 57.
Yes.
I read the note. It says you read it down the page as 2 columns. Can you talk about this as an artist, why you did it in 2 columns and how you do read it?
Yeah. So I was fascinated by the Linnaeus taxonomy that has the 2 sections, and the first part has a cap, and the second part doesn't. And so there's some imitation of that going on in the form. The poem came from a trip to Jamaica, and our just kind of discovering, I didn't know that they were there, these incredible, beautiful, tiny snails that each one is like its own unique world. And so it started with looking at those carefully, but then after that I researched more and started reading about Linnaeus and seeing these connections. And so as the poem kind of evolved, it sort of evolved in a Linnaeus direction.
Maybe 1 or 2 more?
So when they blew up the hydrogen bomb,
Yes.
else, nothing happened. I mean, nothing
And we're also
catastrophic.
here.
Something catastrophic happened. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know.
Please finish
I know.
telling me this. I can't wait to get home and look up what the big is. I kind of need to know right now.
Yeah, there was a great story about, if you look it up, Operation Starfish Prime and NPR, you'll find a great story about it. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, the hubris of that, thinking, I wonder what that thing is around our butt. Let's shoot this incredibly powerful hydrogen bomb into it and see what happens. Yeah, they had all these crazy ideas. Well, what might happen? Like maybe we might be able to sort of ride that belt with the hydrogen bomb and then drop it on Moscow. Maybe they might be able to do that too. But from everything I read, nothing came of it. We all survived it, and they never used it for any military reasons. But yeah, the idea of let's have a party and see what drops around us as the colors go on. It's too incredible not to be true. The only thing I made up in that poem was the names of the drinks. Because I had to do the Van Allen Bells of Bourbon. It was just asking for that. But I don't really know what the special names were people had for their Rainbow Bomb Party cocktails.
That's all I've got right now. I'm sorry. That was just
That's cool.
incredible. I should keep things telling. Thank you.
There's a question up here.
Hi. What really started your journey as a poet?
Ooh. Being an outcast child, probably. Being a hermit and loving words and liking to read a lot and then liking to play with them and see what I could do. I think junior high was when I started really writing, the whole teenage angst kind of thing. So maybe you don't know, maybe that was just. But during that time, it was really, in some ways an escape, but in some ways finding a place. And I just really found myself wanting to spend time with language and seeing what it could do. That's really cool. Thank you. Say it again.
Have you written about your mother?
My mother. Yes. My last book, Road Scouter, was largely about my mother. Yeah, so my mother, as one of the poems alluded to, had lung cancer, and the last 9 months of her life were really pretty awful. And Road Scouter is largely about that. In fact, after I wrote that book, I thought, I want to write about something as far away from cancer as I could possibly get. And I started traveling back to Southern Africa and doing these more ecological poems with memory. And my father had experimental heart surgery during that time, nearly died, but survived. And then we had these great trips together, and then he, while I was writing the book, died of prostate cancer. And so, can't control these things. And so the whole thing with his death got integrated into the book as well. But yeah, Road Scatter is mostly about my book.
Thanks. Well, and thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
We've got books in the back for sale, and Sandy will be sticking around and signing those if you would like to purchase one for the next few minutes. Yeah, see what happens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.